I'm a character designer, and lately I've had the itch to design characters based on fruit. So that's what we're doing today. When I say design based on fruit, I mean taking the shapes, colors, silhouette, function, or any other aspect unique to the fruit, and trying to find interesting ways to apply those to a humanoid character. This whole thing kind of started from the term cherry-coated on TikTok. It's an aesthetic that's full of deep red tones, mixed textures, and a sort of sultry and luxurious vibe. Not that I stuck to that, I used it as more of a guideline. But for example, this first character is wearing materials that are all soft but in different ways, from her bow to her dress to her socks. I'm not sure if it came across, but I wanted her dress to look like it might be kind of velvety. And as for her shape language, I basically used as many round edges as I possibly could to be similar to the very round shape of the fruit itself. At this point, I thought it might be fun to have each character embody very different fashion styles from each other, which would force me to explore different aspects of the cherry itself. So for this first one, as I said, I focused only on the sweetness and the roundness of the cherry, not on the tartness or the shapes of the stem. This second character is more true to what I see online around the term cherry-coated. She's got her suit jacket on, which is still kind of out there with its bright color, but it doesn't feel as clownish as it could next to the pinstripe pattern of her dress. She kind of feels like somebody I'd be scared to approach at a work party, but who would be pretty chill once a conversation was started, I would hope. Something I've noticed about this trend on TikTok is that most women still tend to dress very femininely, albeit in a business casual way, but they still wear jewelry, with ribbons and bows in their hair, and incorporate lacy details in their gloves or tights. Not to mention, the makeup is incredible. I kind of wish I'd had the energy and time to paint some close-up portraits of each of these characters, because it's hard to put any loving detail into their makeup when their face just doesn't take much space on the canvas. Anyway, this character has a cherry in her drink, and I was initially calling her a tart cherry in my mind, since that's a kind of cherry. But then I remembered that the word tart is used as an insult in some parts of the world, so instead, she's my sour cherry character. I'd say this was the most experimental of my cherry characters. I'd stuck very closely to the classic warm red tones for obvious reasons, but I really liked how the cherry-coated aesthetic uses cooler, almost pinky hues. So I thought, why not include them in this character's hair? I still like that choice, but because I didn't plan out the rest of the colors, I basically confused myself during the coloring part. I knew that I wanted a darker skin tone than my previous two characters, but I had no idea how to separate the values in her outfit. Now that I'm looking at it, there were a couple color iterations that actually worked quite well, but I remember feeling at the time that nothing was working. I guess sometimes my expectation of what an art piece should look like can cloud the good things about the way it actually turns out looking. But that's okay, I'm working on my expectations every single time I paint, and I just kept going until I found something that I liked. Moving on, I had some fun being more literal with my cherries. They come in twos, connected by their stems, so I added that to the idea of twins in horror movies. And pretty soon, I had these two girls conjoined by their stems. Imagine them standing in your hallway at night, or maybe in the doorway after you've gone to bed. Cherry Dum and Cherry D. Lastly, I made a duck, because I love drawing ducks. I tried to make him look as gummy as possible, and yeah, took a couple of tries, but I like him. After I posted the cherry characters to Instagram and TikTok, dragon fruit was swiftly requested as the next fruit. I decided to start out with some quick, messy sketches. The point of these sketches is not to make anything pretty. In fact, when I made them, I was convinced that I'd never show them to anyone, and many artists don't. But maybe it'll be helpful for you to see that just because I have the skills to make an artwork presentable, doesn't mean it's always worth spending the time and effort to do so. Instead, the point of this spread was to put down ideas and just get them out of my head. I could take the dragon fruit prompt in so many directions, and sometimes that sea of possibilities feels a bit overwhelming, especially when paired with my frequent fear of choosing the quote-unquote wrong options. Not that there are wrong options, I actually think that there usually aren't, but I never said my fears were reasonable. So this method of sketching quickly helps me to explore ideas without expending too much energy and still retaining my excitement to get started for real. Being an artist that takes forever and gets bored with your own art is such a real thing for me. Anyway, with all these possibilities available to me, I felt that I needed more direction, so I decided to mix the prompt inspired by dragon fruit with archetypes. So, giving them titles like the caregiver, the sage, etc. All characters that you could see having a role in a fantasy hero movie. In addition to that, I had some adjectives in mind when designing them. Looking back, adding a new limitation to my prompt was probably the most helpful thing I could have possibly done. since it helped me to define my goal better. This inherently led to less wearable outfits than I designed for the cherries, which makes extra sense to me because dragon fruit are pretty unique looking in both color and shape. It translates to a pretty avant-garde look, I think. This character I'm working on now is called the Ruler, and the words I had in mind while designing her were dragoness and elegant. She is the only character in this lineup that has dragon spikes sticking out of her spine as well as horns on her head because I just couldn't ignore that dragons are really cool and this fruit has dragon in its name. I also used lots of draping around her in an effort to have it feel like maybe she has both robes and unfurled wings, in a way, but without putting in a lot of detail. It's supposed to be subtle. I put a lot of effort into her expression and it's hard to tell from far away, but she actually has some scleral discoloration, which was an idea I got from looking at the seeds inside dragon fruit. I hope you like her. This character is the Sage, and his secret descriptive words are cryptic and multi-layered, because I imagine him to be one of those side characters that doesn't really give much information unless he's forced to by the main characters. Like the annoying, pompous royal counselor that gives advice in the form of obtuse riddles. I was also able to take the word multi-layered literally in a couple different ways, since his garments are obviously very layered, as befits a member of nobility, but he's somehow also able to project himself, or at least his likeness. Maybe some sort of multi-dimensional astral projection if he's big into that side of TikTok. Since he's a sage, he's also got a third eye which continues this semicircle shape motif that you can also see in his clasp and the overall shape of his robes. Here is the sorceress. She's the wild card of this group of characters, and by that I mean I had no idea what to do with her, so I kept trying out ideas until I realized she was done. Her words are a little more vague, as they're torpid and powerful. I relied more on what felt right for her, which was lots of closed body language and floaty magic bits, for a lack of a better description. I can't believe I haven't seen a dragon fruit inspired design yet, which has floating hair. It feels like the most obvious thing to do now that I've done it, but to be fair, it took me till the third character to do it, so maybe I'm just saying things now. Anyway, I've gotten the most comments out of this whole project talking about how much people enjoy her extra arms. I'm not sure why I added them, possibly because I couldn't decide which pose for the arms to commit to, so I did both, but I'm gonna say that it just works because so much of a dragon fruit's signature look is all about those extra bits that poke out, so extra arms adds a similar factor to her silhouette. Yeah. On to another star of this cast, say hello to the Outlaw. She is flashy, adaptable, and resilient. Flashy because look at a dragon fruit and look at her and tell me that either of them are subtle, and adaptable/resilient because you need to be in order to be a good outlaw. And she's the best because she runs around looking like that, no doubt sticking out like a sore thumb in a crowd and still somehow never getting caught. What's her crime? Your guess is as good as mine. But yeah, I couldn't resist including details like her freckles and eyebrows being in the shape of dragon fruit seeds. She has a lot of round, sweeping shapes to her, accompanied by little pokey triangles, which I got directly from the reference on screen, as I did with each of the unique references for this character lineup. If you'd like to see more, I do have a post with a lot more thoughts like this on how to use references. Prepare to say goodbye to the dragon fruit characters because this is the last character in the group. This is the caregiver, and she is gentle and attentive. Two things that caregivers should arguably be, but are not always. She's inspired not only by the fruit directly, but by the delectable Starbucks drink, which is my favorite refreshing summer treat and has been for 6 years running. The caregiver has lost an eye at some point in her life, and even though she still stands tall, she clearly still has some injuries. Aw man, now that I think about it, I could have had her applying ice to her wounds or something to really take the element of ice straight from the drink. I really love the green tendrils on the dragon fruit itself, so although the drink has nothing like it, I still added them to her as some sort of magical healing tendrils or something. Maybe they're super sensitive and help her to be extra attentive to the state and moods of her patients or something, because there is something magical about her in a way that the outlaw, for example, doesn't have. Maybe it's why she has elf ears and none of the others do. A mystery. I hope you enjoyed the last segment because we're on to mango now. Mangoes are such fun because of their colors, but I was also really drawn to the specific look of when they're cut and ready to eat. That sort of 3D grid pattern is pretty iconic, especially when paired with the bright, warm yellow color and soft texture of the mango. Another thing that I really wanted to do was experiment with how to complement such a strong color as the mango yellow while still keeping it as the central color, not an accent color as it usually might be used. For this first character, I did that by making her accent pieces gold in addition to, not instead of, making her skirt bright yellow. I really love the way the skirt pattern came out. Originally, it was supposed to resemble gingham, but I think it fits better the way that it ended up looking, almost like tweed. I also was only able to get to that look after abstracting the 3D grid pattern we talked about earlier and turning it into a flat pattern. So although it looks simple and took no time to make in the end, I'm proud of the thought process that it took to get there, if that makes sense. That's what most of designing is, after all. People will want to hire you for the way that you think and can put pieces together to create new things, whereas any art form you choose to work in is like the language that you use to convey those ideas. But that's a different rabbit hole entirely. Breaking even further out of the norm than ever before, I got inspired to make a painting of a cute little fox that's curled up into the same shape as a mango. I call this piece Mango Sorbet Fox. It was a good experience in using super bright colors, learning how to tone them down, and then boosting the parts that I wanted to keep bright. Most of it really comes down to being aware of what values you're using, but being able to course correct after your values are already not doing what they're supposed to is a super useful skill to grow. Hopefully it's recognizable, but the bird friend I plopped onto his head is supposed to resemble the shape of a leaf on a mango stem. In the end, I liked this piece so much that I turned it into a postcard to send to last month's supporters on Patreon. Thank you to everyone who has been supporting me, not only on Patreon, but also just by watching this video. It helps so much more than you know, and I'm very grateful for you. Moving on, for this character, I focused on the singular roundness of the mango. Which sounds kind of funny, the singular roundness, but by that I just mean it doesn't have many bits and bobs that poke out, like the dragon fruit does, for example. It honestly doesn't really have much going on in terms of shape. The fruit alone, I mean, without its stem and leaf connected. So much like the fruit itself, I added interest in the form of bright colors and patterns that don't break the silhouette at all. So the silhouette is kept as one overall round shape. Speaking of that, for this next character, I tried the opposite approach to her silhouette. Keep making round mango shapes, but make them big and separate from each other. I thought having big ballooning sleeves would be perfect for this. Even in the hairstyle that this girl ends up wearing, her braids are outlines of the mango shape, but they're braids, so their silhouettes are a little more complex. The fun of design is that everything is connected. Last but not least, I drew inspiration for this character from a mango blossom. I saw this dress and just knew that it would fit so well, even though I wouldn't need to put in as much time designing the outfit as I usually would. I couldn't pass it up. It's perfect. Throwing a blossom in her hair makes it pretty clear what I'm referencing. And I just thought her pose was really fun because her arms are mimicking the spread out petal shape. Okay, your turn. Out of each batch of characters, I want to know if you can come up with names for any of them. Or if you have any other objects that you'd like me to use as inspiration for character designs, let me know. If you thought this was fun and would like to watch me design Pokemon based on their names alone, you might enjoy my last video, which was exactly that. And if this isn't the first video from me that you've watched all the way through, please consider subscribing. I'm here for you every week. And I'm melmel.cascas, not only here, but also on Instagram, TikTok, Etsy, and Patreon. Bye!